In a second day of Pentagon hearings, top Pentagon officials were questioned by the House Armed Services Committee today on the deadly U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Our next guests were both in attendance. Joining us now is Ohio Congressman Mike Turner, who is also a senior member on the House Intelligence Committee. Also with us, Missouri Congresswoman Vicky Hartzler. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Congresswoman, I'm going to start with you. Did we learn anything new in today's hearings?
Well, I think what was important today is that both Secretary Austin, General Milley, General McKenzie reaffirmed that they had clearly told the White House that they believed a stabilization force about 2,500 needed to stay in Afghanistan. What's important about that is, as we know, in the George Stephanopoulos interview, the president specifically denied that anyone had told him that. He said no, and then he said no, not that I recall. Now, today you had the White House, press spokesperson, Psaki saying, well, he didn't really mean that. He meant, they couldn't stay and achieve his goals. They'd have to stay there forever. That's not what he was asked. That's not what these gentlemen were saying. And clearly, the White House chosen a path that has made Afghanistan and the United States much less safe, and Afghanistan, once again, a threat of a haven for terrorists.
Congresswoman, from your perspective, did we learn anything new?
Well, as Congressman Turner said, they did admit that within 6 to 36 months, we would once again see a reconstitution of the ISIS and the Taliban, and they could endanger our country. Very, very concerning. They admitted that they also, we had lost tens of billions of dollars worth of military equipment, such that they even had a military parade. We also got more information about the Bagram airport and why they left there. This was a very strategic location. And the reason that they did is because of the order that came from the White House and the State Department to draw down below 2,500 down to 650 troops. And that is was needed to protect the embassy in Kabul. And so the generals abandoned Bagram in the middle of the night. And of course, that left us vulnerable to that prison there that was full of ISIS and Taliban terrorists. I asked General Austin if it is true of the media reports that I have heard that one of those terrorists from the Bagram prison that was released was the suicide bomber that ended up ending the lives of our 13 American service members. Unfortunately, he just talked and talked until the time expired and just said he'd have to give back to me on the record. So I was very disappointed about that. But I also hammered in on General Milley, trying to find out what he said to General Xi, who is his counterpart in China, on January 8th. And as you know, there's a book that's been published that alleges that he said to General Xi that if America were to go to war against China, he would give him a heads up and he'd let him know. And so I asked him, did you do that? And he tried to evade the question. I asked it again. And finally he said, well, it was a lengthy conversation, but I did say that, hey, I'd even give you a call if we were going to do that. And I told him that I believe that that is grounds for him to resign, that this is against our country. And when we are talking about the number one adversary, China, against America, and you tell them that you're going to give them a heads up, he ought to resign.
Right. By the way, I don't think you can guard the food court on Bagram Air Force Base with 650. I mean, they set these guys up to fail big time. Congressman Turner, though, I do want to follow up with that call that Milley made, because you did ask him about that call with his Chinese counterpart and said that intelligence was significant and was sent to the president, the vice president, the director of national intelligence, the director of CIA. Basically, Milley saying, hey, all of these people knew about that. Were you satisfied with the answer he gave you?
No, not at all. So basically, there are two things here. Either General Milley is exaggerating his role and is saying that this intelligence was that China believed that we were going to be attacking them, and he, saved the day and came in and dissuaded them that the United States had any ill intent, or it's actually very, very serious, and it's not something that should be being handled by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That it should have been elevated to the cabinet level, and certainly the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, National Security Council, National Security Advisor should have been engaged as well as the President of the United States. Secretary Austin confirmed that. Secretary Austin said that if, in fact, he had that situation, he would not just have his Joint Chief of Staff pick up the phone and in a casual conversation relate that the United States does not mean the adversary any ill will. And I think that's, why then we're very concerned about, General Milley undertaking these things on his own, being sort of a renegade over the Department of Defense. I asked him to produce a number of things, including the intelligence, the transcript of his telephone conversation, things where we can actually provide oversight and not just deal with the fact that this is a guy who picks up the phone, calls our adversary, and doesn't come to Congress, doesn't come to the cabinet of the President of the United States, goes to the media and talks about it. And clearly that's wrong.
Yeah.
I do want to hit on something else that General Milley said today. He said that he was not aware of a formal request to the Taliban to stay past the August 31st deadline. President Biden has said multiple times that was not an option to extend that date. It was not an arbitrary deadline. Congresswoman, also based off what we're hearing, that President Biden said he didn't know about the 2,500 troops that all Pentagon officials have said they advised him on. Are we starting to see a pattern of dishonesty from President Biden to the American people?
It's either dishonesty or he is incapable and incompetent. And so take your pick. Any of them are very, very concerning.
But the interesting thing, Congressman Turner, is both Milley and McKenzie said that the war on terror is not over. Specifically, McKenzie said he believes it's now going to be harder. Do you agree with that? I mean, I feel like it's almost like, OK, so now what?
Right. So that goes to the August 29th terrible killing of an innocent man and his family. The President Biden has said we don't need to be in Afghanistan. One, Al-Qaeda is not there and ISIS is not there, which, of course, now, but in this testimony, both before the Senate and the House, all of the Secretary and the two generals confirm that they are present and that the Taliban have not broken their ties with them. But the second aspect of it is that this totally blows away any of the White House's touting its over-the-horizon capabilities. On the Republican side, we've always been saying there are no over-the-horizon capabilities. You can't go into an area and just merely observe it and disrupt any terrorist activities that's happening there. General McKenzie reported that they had been watching this gentleman, and he appeared to be a terrorist. In fact, he was an international aid worker, and the things that he went about his day doing are those types of things that an international aid worker would do. And yet, tragically, he was killed by the Department of Defense assessing that he was a terrorist. So they've shown that, one, there is a terrorist threat in Afghanistan. They don't have the ability to execute counterterrorism, and that we've got quite a debacle on our hands and quite a threat that is going to be evolving for the United States that we don't have the military capability to address.
Right. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I would just want to say something. Congresswoman Hartzler, I think what you hit on was so important because it's gotten forgotten that when we blew that car up, which ended up killing 10 civilians, we've now still let go or not gotten that person, that ISIS person that killed all those service members, and it's been lost in the narrative. And I applaud you for continuing to stay focused on that, because no one's talking about the fact that that person who killed our service members is still at large. So I'm sorry we're out of time, but I applaud you for keeping the gas on that issue.
Thank you both for joining us, and thank you for sharing your insights here tonight.
Thank you.